Hello Booktube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome to my channel, Book as in Books. In this video, I want to talk about the Booktube Prize because I'm super excited about it. The selection for the first round was announced on Tuesday, February 1, and I will leave a link to this announcement video in the description box below. Now, if you don't know what the Booktube Prize is, it is a wonderful initiative started by Robert from the channel Barter Hordes. He is still the one organizing it and preparing everything, and he works very hard. And Robert, if you're watching this, thank you for your work. I am so grateful. This is my favorite Booktube event. It's the reason I started a Booktube channel. It's an aspect that makes Booktube so wonderful. So thank you so much. So I will leave a link to Robert's channel in the description box, and I will leave links to two other videos that inspired me to make this one. One is a video by Cousin from Always Doing, and the other one is the video by Mariana from Mariana Mas Books. Both of them commented the nonfiction selection, and I will do the same because I volunteered to be a judge for the nonfiction division. There are three divisions in the Booktube Prize. One is the fiction division, one is a new one for this year, which is the fiction and translation division, and there's the nonfiction division. A few words about the fiction and translation division. I think it's one of the most interesting division. For content, I think it's the most diverse because it includes not only writers from all over the world, but writers from different time periods, because their books, the books that are chosen, they are books whose translation has been published in 2021, and not books that have been published in 2021. So there are books by authors who are dead. Not I think that it's wonderful that the authors are dead, but I think it's wonderful to compare writers from different eras, to put them in the same division. For example, there's a book by Simone de Beauvoir that is a contender. I don't know if it's a contender, but it has been selected. But there's also books by modern French writers. So I think it could be interesting to see how these older books do compare to newer ones, or how the newer ones compare to the older ones. I think that's an interesting aspect of the fiction and translation division. Now, I am judging nonfiction. I say I'm judging, but I'm not. The computer did not select me for the first round. It's okay. The computer doesn't like me. I don't like computers. It's fair. I can live with it. So what I'll do is that I'll read here and there books I want to read, and perhaps I will have read now a book that will make the final, and I will gain a bit of time like that. So who knows? So I'm going to talk about the books group by group. I don't think I will talk specifically about every book because most of them I don't know them very well. But I think I will mention the ones I voted for, the ones I would like to read, and perhaps see if there are favorites in one group or another. The ones I voted for. The way the Booktube Prize works is that when you volunteer to be a judge, Roberts makes a preliminary selection of about 80 or 100 books, and of that we are allowed 20 votes. We can vote for 20 books we would like to see selected for the first round. The way I use my votes, I use the first 15 for books that I believe should be there, whether I like them or not. I decided to do that last year. Last year was my first year judging. I was super enthusiastic, and when I received the selection, it was over 100 books last year. I chose a bunch of them. I wrote down, okay, I want to read this one, this one, this one, and I had way more than 20, so I had to pare it down. And at first I thought I would vote strategically and exclude the favorites. For example, last year, the overwhelming favorite was Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. So I thought, oh, I'm not going to waste a vote on that. Everybody's going to vote for that. But then I thought, if everybody does like me, Cast will not be selected and we will look like idiots. So I decided that I would use the first 15 votes for books that I think should be there, whether I like them or not, and use the last 5 votes to please me. So that is what I did, and of the 20 votes that I used all 20. 17 of my choices made it through to the selection. And of those, 14 of the 15 books I thought should be there made it through. The one that is not there was a book about American history. I think it was about Richard Nixon. I forgot the title of the book, but I think that is the one that did not make it through. And for the other two that did not make it through, I'm less surprised. One of them was a very thick book about art during the Cold War, and the other one was perhaps not as thick, but it was also about art. It was Letters to Camondo. It is letters written to a museum. So as soon as I saw that one, I thought, oh, that's going to be so fun. But I knew at the same time that nobody would care about that book, so I'm not surprised at all that it's not there. So those are the three that did not make it through. This other 17 that I voted for are through. So now let's examine that group by group. Group A. If I had been a judge, this is the group I would have liked to judge. Of the 6 books in there, I voted for 3, and the other 3 were sort of on the cusp. They were on my long list. They were books that I had to eliminate. So there are 3 books on nature in there. I just voted for On Animals. The other 2, I did not vote for them, but I hesitated when I should also say, when I choose my first 20 votes, or particularly the first 15, I try to make sure that it's representative of the field. So I make sure that there are nature books, history books, memoirs, science books. I make sure that it's representative of the nonfiction genre in general. So I cannot vote for 10 nature books. So I had to choose 1 or 2 or 3 nature books, and of these 3 that are in group A, I voted for On Animals. So in that group is probably the book I would like to read the most. Another one I voted for was Crying in H Mark, but that one was more out of obligation because it was so popular. By default, memoirs are not necessarily my favorite type of books, but there are memoirs that I like. I'm not opposed to memoirs. I think I'll talk a bit more about it later. And one of the books that was in my bottom 5 that made it through is The Enlightenment. It's a big book about French philosophers in the 18th century, or maybe not just French, but about 18th century philosophers. I can understand that it's not to the taste of everyone, but I thought it looked fascinating. It's precisely the sort of book that I love, so I did include it. One that I decided not to vote for, but I thought deserved to be there too, was The Plague Year, which is about COVID. So it definitely deserves a spot on the list. However, even if I left it out in the end, I decided that it would be too depressing and I did not include it. But it is a book that is definitely worth reading, I think. So yeah, of this group, the one I would like to read the most would be On Animals. In group B, the one I would like to read the most is These Precious Days by Anne Patchett. Maybe it's because of the cute dog on the cover. It is a collection of essays that were written recently, I don't know exactly how recently, and they cover a whole bunch of topics. And I tend to like collection of essays, particularly essays written by novelists. For some reason, I think they read well because they pay attention to how they write, but I think novelists or writers of fiction in general are good at finding certain little things in life and at presenting them in interesting ways. So this is one of the books I'm really curious to read. In group C, the one I want to read would be A Swim in the Pond in the Rain. It's the blue one you see right there. I have not read it yet, but I definitely want to read it, obviously. It is about writing of short stories by Russian writers. So that sounds very interesting. In that group, in group C, there are 2 true crime books. Sometimes I wonder when there are 2 similar books in the same group, if it plays for them or against them. Maybe it can split the vote. They probably get compared one with another, and probably that one doesn't do as well as the other. However, it can go both ways. It's possible that if the judges of Group C love true crime, that it makes it both make it through, or if judges of Group C in general do not like true crime, it's possible that both end up at the bottom. But it's also possible that the preferences of the judges have make no difference. I've said before that memoirs are not necessarily my favorite type of book, but however, I do not necessarily put memoirs at the bottom of my list just because they are memoirs. I judge them for what they are. Are they good memoirs or not? And then I vote accordingly. In group D, I'm trying to remember what I voted for in that group. I have to say this is perhaps a group that interests me a little less. I think I voted for Orwell's Roses out of obligation because it was so much talked about, because Rebecca Solnit is so famous, I guess. And also because it's a collection of essays, and I think a collection of essays should be represented in the Booktube Prize. One that I don't think will do very well is Real Estate by Deborah Levy. It is the fourth part of a memoir, so I don't know if it can be read on its own. I don't know if people will feel like something is missing if it's part 4 of something. So I wonder how that one will do. White Magic is, I think, the only book by an Indigenous author in this selection of 48 books. It is about how Indigenous objects, Indigenous symbols are used or perceived in general, in culture, in cultural products, and in public consciousness, I guess. So that one is interesting. And there are, again, 2 memoirs in this, Aftershocks and Chasing Me to My Grave, which is about growing up in the Jim Crow South. So again, the opposition of 2 types of books that are similar. I always think it's interesting how it plays. And we have the same situation in Group E. Group E is another group I would have loved to judge. There are a bunch of history books in there. There is science history with The Doctors Blackwell and The Codebreaker, which are both about women in science. The Doctors Blackwell is about 2 women who became doctors in mid-19th century, and The Codebreaker is about the discovery of DNA, or the understanding of DNA. We have Facing the Mountain, which I think is about World War II. The Sinner and the Saint. That is one of the 2 books in the 48 book selection that I have read. And I don't think it will make it through. I did love it. I think it's wonderful, but I think the subject is too narrow. It's too limited. It is about the writing of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And unless you have read Crime and Punishment, unless you're interested in Crime and Punishment and in Dostoevsky, there's no point in reading that book. I don't think it's enough of a general interest to make it through to the next round. And I think there are very strong contenders in there. A Ghost in the Throat, that is something that is, I think, according to what I read, part memoir, part poetry. So that can play in a very interesting way. I don't know how it will play against these no-nonsense books that are there in that group. Group F. Group F, I think, once again, quite a bit of history. All the Freaking Troubles of Our Days, I think that is about World War II and resistance in Germany. The Black Church, about the Black Church in the United States. 2 books on nature, again, A Most Remarkable Creature and Under White Sky. Girlhood, I did vote for Girlhood. This is a collection of essays about how girls are brought up, the images they are bombarded with, and the principles that they are given in general. I thought it would be a nice counterbalance, another way of talking about growing up that would be different than the memoir. So that is probably the book I want to read the most in that group. I'm also interested about Notes on Grief by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Because, once again, she's a novelist. So, as I said earlier, I think novelists sometimes have clever insights about life. But I wonder how that book will do against the others. I think it's quite short, and it's more a longish essay than a full-fledged nonfiction book. So maybe it will not be weighty enough to make it through to the next round. I don't know. It's something that remains to be seen. Group G. Well, Group G, we have the favorite of the 48, the one that is probably going to win. If I had to bet a little $2 somewhere, it would be on Empire of Pain. I read Nothing to Say. No, that is not. It's Nothing to Say? Say Nothing. Say Nothing by the same author a couple of years ago for the Booktube Prize, and it was awesome. It ended at number 2 in the Booktube Prize. So once again, I think it could do very well. And in that group, we have, again, 2 memoirs, Somebody's Daughter and Punch Me Up to the Gods, which are both memoirs about growing up Black in the United States. One is a girl, one is a boy. So once again, I'm curious to see how it will match. Will they both make it through? Because these memoirs tend to be quite powerful. So will they both make it through? Will they both be knocked out? Will one be considered so much better than the other? I'm curious to see how it will play. And finally, in Group H, there's the second book that I've read in all the 48 books. It's The Case of the Murderous Dr. Cream. I think it could do very well because it is well written, well researched. It's a topic that tends to attract booktubers. It's about a serial killer, so it's true crime. So that one could do well. And at the same time, I don't know how strong are the others. I think how the word is passed, which is how slavery is talked about and taught in the United States, could be a strong contender. A Little Devil in America is also about racial relations, I guess, in the United States. It is about how Black performers are perceived, how its Black performance is judged. So that can be interesting too. The one that I would like to read the most in that is Graceland at Last. Once again, a collection of essays. I guess I'm in the mood for essays. I did not vote for this one, but I do want to read it. It's a collection of essays about the American South. So this is what I think group by group. Now collectively, I think that the United States are very represented in there. All the history books, or almost all of the history books, are books about the history in the United States. Many of the memoirs are about growing up in the United States. Many of the essays are about living in the United States. I understand that we have to set rules for the selection of the books, and Robert decided that the rules would be a book published in the United States in the previous year. So that makes it very United States centric. I don't think it applies as much in fiction. It doesn't apply at all in translated fiction, because obviously it means you have books from all over the world. But in the case of nonfiction, sometimes topics can be much more local than they are in fiction. So I think the United States are perhaps a little bit overrepresented in there. And the other thing that is clearly overrepresented, and I say clearly because clearly it's memoirs. I've said earlier that I'm not necessarily a fan of memoirs. I have nothing against them on their own. There's nothing in memoir that makes me say yuck. The problem is not the memoir itself. The problem is the quantity. There are way too many of them. Out of 48 books, 12 are memoirs. That's a quarter of the field. And of these 12 memoirs, 5 are growing up memoirs. Memoirs about growing up. Growing up Black, growing up in the South, growing up Asian, growing up in a broken family. And I don't care for those. I don't care at all for growing up memoirs. I think they are the least interesting. I don't know why. It's really strictly a personal choice. Now, I'm going to be fair. If they end up in my group in the next round, I will judge them for what they are. Are they well done? Are they well written? Are they compelling? Do they tell something relevant? Or is it just about, oh, poor little me, I had a sad childhood? I don't care for sad childhood. I'm heartless. I know. It's really heartless. I don't care for sad childhood. But the sad thing is, I don't care for sad childhoods. I think I was oversaturated with them when I was a teenager. In school, we had to read a bunch of books about battered children. I don't know what the teachers were thinking, but we had to read 3 almost in a row. They were novels, they were not memoirs, but... and then there was a memoir that was super popular in Quebec about... yeah, there was that's probably something you don't know. There was a memoir about a battered child that was a bestseller in the province of Quebec, and it became a TV miniseries. And the person who played that battered girl was Céline Dion. So that is a bit of pop information you probably don't know, pop culture that you probably didn't know, that Céline Dion tried to be an actress for a little while. She wasn't very good, so she didn't stick with it, which is a very smart choice on her part. So all of this to say that 5 memoirs, that's of growing up, that's 10% of the field. It's too much for my liking. And it's not just in the first round of the Booktube Prize. It's the same thing in bookstores. they take too much space on the shelves. I think there's too many of them. So that is strictly a personal preference. So yeah, that is it. So on that heartless note that I don't care for sad childhood, I will ask you, what do you think of the first round selection for the Booktube Prize? What books do you think are you most interested in reading? Do you think, like me, that Empire of Pain is the favorite? Which books do you think may be a serious competition for Empire of Pain, or for the other books that you think will be the favorite? And do you like Memoirs of Growing Up? Am I heartless? Let me know what you think in the comment, and thank you everyone for watching. Have a nice day. À la prochaine.